All right. A quick note that today's episode is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel for future use. Before we get started, we would like to respectfully acknowledge the Shawnee and MUAM people who, along with other Indigenous groups, were the first stewards of the land that this museum and Miami University now occupies. It is my pleasure to introduce today's host, Collections Manager and Registrar, Ms. Laura Stewart, to guide us through today's session.
Thank you, Sherry. Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to have you here with us today for this installment of Miami University Art Museum's Noontime Chatter series. And it's also my pleasure to be here today with several esteemed colleagues, Jacqueline Johnson, Zack Tucker, Stephanie Danker, Alia Levar Wegner, and Kimberly Hoffman. All of whom, along with now retired Art Museum Director Bob Wicks, were instrumental in the creation of a traveling panel exhibition focusing on Freedom Summer, the 1964 Civil Rights Initiative involving students helping with voter registration of Mississippi African Americans and setting up freedom schools following nonviolent protest training that took place right here in Oxford, Ohio, at Western College for Women, now a part of Miami University's campus. This chat episode is in connection with A Lens for Freedom, Civil Rights Photographs by Steve Shapiro, on view this semester at the Art Museum. With the artist's permission, several of the photographic prints now in the collection of Miami University Art Museum were reproduced for the Finding Freedom Summer panel project and can be made available for viewing by appointment in future semesters. Now, let's go around the room, and if each person could please introduce themselves and give some background information regarding their role and contribution to the traveling panel exhibit, that would be wonderful. Jackie, let's start with you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jacqueline Johnson, and I'm the University Archivist at Miami University. And I work on the panels in terms of creating the wording and text.
I'm Zack Tucker. I'm an assistant professor of communication design, and I was responsible for helping develop the panel design telling the story of Freedom Summer.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Danker, associate professor of art education, and my students created the lesson plans for the website that are associated with each of the panels. I'm also working with partnerships in schools with getting the panels into schools.
Hi, my name is Alia Levar Wegner. I'm the digital collections librarian, and I worked with some of the image management, meaning how I worked with helping acquire the images and working with the designers to make sure that they had the highest quality that they needed for the panels and the website. I also helped coordinate the development of the website that you'll see today.
Hi, my name is Kim Hoffman. I am the preservation librarian here at Miami, and I'm responsible for shipping and logistics as well as the material maintenance of the panels. So I'll be packing them up and shipping them out, as well as making repairs as needed going forward.
The history of Western Freedom Summer. Freedom Summer was a project in the summer of 1964 with the purpose of supporting and the voting rights of African Americans. Volunteers attempted to register 17,000 residents of the state of Mississippi, which had the lowest percentage of African American voters in the United States. This project was known also as the Freedom Project. Western College. Approximately 700 volunteers trained at Western College for Women in Oxford, Ohio for 2 weeks.
So I'm going to discuss how our team works to tell the story through the design and development of the panels. So we first got together to select imagery for the different panels, and we really wanted to emphasize in the story the themes of kind of documentation and reflection. So we used a mix of contemporary art, documentary photography, and everyday student responses and snapshots to show multiple perspectives on Freedom Summer from people who experienced it, as well as people who are sort of living in the legacy of Freedom Summer. We chose to feature many Shapiro images. As mentioned by Laura at the beginning of the presentation, Director Emeritus Bob Wicks helped compile the images from the collection for us to be able to choose and select from, and Shapiro kept coming up over and over again. And so we were really fortunate to be able to work with the Miami University Art Museum as a partner on this project, and with the Shapiro images, which are on display and accessible for teachers and students who really want to dig deeper into these images. After we started selecting images, we really wanted to emphasize student involvement. So we hired 2 student designers who are interested in social justice work. These students were Bailey Lepley and Sadie McQuitty, who have now graduated from Miami, but were great in the development of this project, and were really interested in learning more. When they started, they didn't have much of a relationship with Freedom Summer, but that all changed through various activities we were engaging with to learn about the history. So we visited the memorial on campus. We spent time there. We watched several documentaries, including Jacqueline Johnson's wonderful documentary on the Freedom Summer training program, to really learn about Freedom Summer and how it impacted their lives. And then they responded to that in kind of a visual way that resulted in the branding themes and the different ways we were going to tell the story, really pulling back to historical narratives as well as the experiences that they had at the memorial, and the colors and things that could represent both Western College for Women and Miami University. Throughout the process of the design and development of the panels, several members of the team were able to form relationships with the historic Mount Zion United Methodist Church in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And that really helped us be able to tell the story. In fact, Bailey Lepley, one of the student designers, was able to travel with us to Mount Zion and meet members of the congregation themselves. This was a really important relationship that we were able to honor for the premiere of these panels, which happened this summer at the 54th commemorative, I can't read the slide, for Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, the 3 volunteers that were killed at the beginning of the training program. And it's really wonderful to celebrate this story with people who are experiencing, the continued legacy of this in their everyday life. And it's been really a powerful tool in sustaining our relationship with them.
Before we change off this slide, we thought it was really significant to debut the panels at the historic Mount Zion United Methodist Church in Philadelphia, Mississippi, because that was the church that was bombed, that drew the volunteers, Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, down to Mississippi, and they were ultimately murdered. But it was a very significant place for us to debut the panels there. And Reverend Michelle Bailey is standing next to the memory panel here. So I'm just going to talk just very briefly about how the lesson plans were developed. They were developed by art education students in the Introduction to Art Education class in spring 2021. The students that are in this class are a variety. They are majors, they're art education majors, people wanting to teach art. It's required for art therapy co-majors and minors, but it's also an option for a creative arts class. So we get students from all over the university that take the class. And they partnered into small groups for developing these lesson plans. So I'm just going to kind of flip through some of the images that we used as anchor images for the lessons. When we had decided upon the different images for use, way back when, like maybe December for which images could be anchor images that we could have really connect to and derive themes or big ideas based on characteristics of the volunteers from Freedom Summer. So that's really how we decided what the themes of the different panels are. They're characteristics of the volunteers. So for example, courage, bravery. This is one of the Shapiro images that's in the exhibition. We have 5 actually that are the anchor images for the lesson plans that are Shapiro images currently on display. This is another Shapiro image, identity. So all of these lesson plans are using, they're for 4th and 5th grade, that's the target audience, but they're using art standards, they're using social emotional learning standards, and they're connecting to a social studies standard. So, for example, the social studies standards that are being addressed would be historical thinking and skills. So the standard would be primary and secondary sources can be used to create historical narratives. Another one is related to civic participation and skills. Individuals have a variety of opportunities to act and influence their state and national government. Citizens have both rights and responsibilities in Ohio and the United States. So these panels are really created for schools and other institutions, libraries, community centers, museums in Ohio, but as noted, we are excited about them going all over the United States and especially to Mississippi where this history is very relevant. Bob Moses, a very young John Lewis. We do have Bob Moses in the exhibition too, apologize. Really exciting image of Martin Luther King Jr. with the volunteers images in the background. Rita Schwerner, thinking about how 4th graders would identify with concepts of injustice. Leadership, this one is Bob Moses, young Bob Moses. So social emotional learning competencies that would be addressed are related to ideas such as self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, which is important for all children and adults to develop. So we do have, just of note, we're working with a school in Cincinnati Public Schools, Fairview Clifton German Language School, who are going to have the exhibit in their school later this month. And then it's very exciting because they're going to bring the whole one of the classes up to the Art Museum to see the exhibition and then to visit the Freedom Summer Memorial. We're very excited about all the opportunities with that and for interaction with our students in the Art Museum galleries. And one other note is that we will be having a teacher workshop to relate the panels and the Shapiro exhibition on Saturday, December 10th, which is the last day of the exhibition at the Art Museum, but a really exciting opportunity to share the lesson plans, the panels, and the exhibition in the Art Museum space. So please let us know if you're interested in attending that. Sorry, flipping quickly. Passing on to my colleague, Alia.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'd now like to talk about a bit about our website and our accessibility. So we talked about all these lesson plans, all the considerations that went into image selection, but now we want to make sure that it's accessible to all and that educators can find these lesson plans easily and connect them with students in addition to viewing the panels. So before I do that, I'm going to take a little detour and bring you behind the scenes of what it takes to once we identify those images to make them available. So image management turned out to be a very challenging and important part of this project. You could have your heart set on an image, perfect storytelling vehicle, it's a powerful work of art, but there's 2 other things that have to happen. One is that you have to be able to use that image, you have to have copyright permissions and licenses. The other, especially for a printed exhibition like this or an online one, the file size has to be high enough that you can display it at its original quality. And that's another important consideration. So we had, there are 41 photographs panels that are part of this exhibition. And to get those, we had to negotiate and coordinate with 16 different image providers. That includes museums, private collectors, nonprofits, archives, and libraries. And so there were two parts to this. We worked with Carla Myers. She's our coordinator of scholarly communication. She helped us with the use permissions and copyright agreements. And then there was also the image quality, and that's where I stepped in and made sure that the designers and students in Zack here had images high enough that they could, that allowed them to maximize their design abilities. That they had high enough images that could make it the size of a refrigerator, which is the width of these panels. And so we worked with several institutions, were able to rephotograph some of these negatives or visual prints for us so that we can get images at this size. The Art Museum, and with the permission of Steve Shapiro, allowed us to rephotograph the prints that are on display so that they could also be displayed a little bit larger here on the panels behind us. The exhibit website was another important component of this project. This is not an online exhibition. It doesn't reproduce the panels behind us, but it's a supplement to them. And it's especially designed for educators. We want to make it as easy as possible for teachers and schools to research, to explore the lesson plans, consider this, and what this would do, these opportunities would offer their students. So it's pretty much designed for educators. There's some core components, but we also want to make sure it's sustainable, that it's not going to break, that it's going to be available for years and hopefully decades to come. And so we did a Jekyll static site. We also support online reservations and some online scheduling, so it makes it very clear for educators to see when are these panels available. They don't have to go back and forth with a bunch of emails. And there's also downloadable lesson plans as well. The website also is fully accessible, and that's an important component, especially for students who maybe need to spend some more time or need to explore these images behind us in a different way depending on their visual abilities, that these images are on the website so they can zoom in and really consider and reflect on these as part of the lesson plans. So just some of if you want to explore the website yourself, it's at findingfreedom.lib.miami.oh.edu. And I just want to point out the incredible work that my colleague Meng Q did in designing this. She's our web design librarian at Miami University Libraries. And one of the most important parts was making sure that there was a visual continuity between the incredible work that the student designers in Zack did in setting the tone, and you saw the reflections that they put into and considerations about their design choices. And we want to make sure that was also represented on the website as well. So we followed their lead in that. And you can see here some of the sub pages. Again, we're focused on making this easy for educators. All the great themes that Stephanie and her students identified, courage, activism, determination, can be easily explored on these sub pages here, as you can see from the grid. And then there's an education resource page as well, where you can download those lesson plans or explore the standards that Stephanie described. There's a lot of decision making that goes into making a website, and so this is one way of mapping that out, just to make sure that we're meeting the needs of educators and users of the website. So here's what one process graph looks like from the moment an educator signs onto the website to if they were to follow through and return the exhibit. This is what that process would look like. And then finally, accessibility was another important concern. We worked with an accessibility consultant from Access MU, and we incorporated accessible design throughout the website and the panels as well. And that also extended to the PDFs and our caption videos.
Okay, so I now will talk a little bit about shipping and maintaining the panels and the materials, what goes into that and will go into that, and what you can expect if you reserve the exhibit. We were very fortunate to be able to speak with Jason Shaman from the Miami University Art Museum when we were planning for shipping and logistics for this exhibit. Jason's experience with similar exhibits in the past was really invaluable and very indebted to his help getting this set up. Because there's a lot of moving parts here, and it's not something that I had experience with before, so I've learned a lot. You can expect there to be 4 shipping boxes with the panels, and each box contains 4 panels in bags. They're all neatly labeled. There is also a binder that goes along with the exhibit that contains a condition reporting form that's simple and brief, but just helps us to keep track of what's going on with the exhibit. And that's because exhibitors can ship the exhibit directly between institutions rather than shipping it back to Miami, which keeps things efficient and keeps the shipping costs down overall. So if you believe that your institution may qualify for free shipping or free or reduced fees, please contact us directly, and that's something that we can talk about. The panels themselves are made of a sturdy wipeable vinyl. This was particularly important to us when we were exploring what the exhibit could look like, because at that time it was in 2020 and we weren't sure what the COVID landscape would look like. Fortunately, there are now vaccines and we've been able to avoid some of the more stringent COVID policies that we had discussed back in 2020. But because the panels are wipeable, they are easy to disinfect should any concerns arise in the future. It is possible that there may be other repairs and maintenance needed with the panels, and that is something that I will take care of here in the libraries, if at all possible, to reduce on replacement costs. So while exhibitors are responsible for covering insurance and would need to pay replacement costs if replacement became necessary, we really think that that's extremely unlikely. So normal wear and tear is something that I can address. There are some setup considerations, such as if you overextend the poles, that could be an issue, but there will be instructions included in the binders with the exhibit. So we think that that's not going to be a big issue either. And of course, you can always reach out to us if you have questions. So if you are interested in reserving the exhibit, and we really hope that some of you will, as Alia mentioned, you can visit the website and there is a button that will take you to a page with more information about the panels, what to expect, and the logistics. And there will be a link to the scheduling and calendaring website that Alia mentioned, which is a separate site. We have 4 sets, which means that we can have 4 simultaneous exhibitions at one time. So we're really expecting to be able to ramp up the capacity quickly for this exhibit. And you'll be able to see all of that on the calendar. So even if one exhibit is in use, that will be red. The other exhibits will be green if they are available for those dates. And at this time, what will happen is you will request a certain time, and that will be blocked off on the calendar, and then an email will go out to you and to me, and we'll be put in contact to finalize those steps. I will make absolutely certain that your dates are clear, and then we will go through to the payment website, which will be online payment unless you need to make other arrangements. So if you have any questions, either before or after you visit that site, please don't hesitate to reach out. The email address is there in the slides, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you panelists so much, but I wondered if we could turn things over to sort of a dialogue now among us. And so a question that occurred to me was if you could help us understand when you were initially planning and meeting, what were some of the goals for this project?
One of the goals, I think the goal was to really allow students in classrooms to have exposure to the Freedom Summer training sessions about the history of it, and that it was connected to Ohio. This exhibit really focuses and really is catered for fourth graders and those who live in the state of Ohio, teachers and children.
There's a lot of community engagement goals too. There's a lot of ways that we can interact with schools, but also with different organizations. We started conceptualizing these could be really great in some libraries, or there's ways that homeschool groups could use these and come in and connect with museum content in the Freedom Summer Memorial. So I think we started to, yes, they're for 4th and 5th graders, but we really started as a group conceptualizing all the different audiences that could be reached through this work as well.
Zach, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more about the whole, how did you come up with this design in addition to student input? What influenced your final decisions on what to go with?
Yeah, I would say, a big part of it was the students' kind of response to their own learnings as they were engaging with Freedom Summer for the first time. A lot of students I encounter with Freedom Summer don't really know the history of the training that happened here, and so it was really a great opportunity to expose them to that, and then pretty much immediately think about how do we reflect on that, how do we represent that through imagery, not only in the photographs that we chose, but also the illustrations and the ways in which we set out the panels based on these themes to tell a larger story. But then even things like, we're designing for 4th and 5th graders, and so they're not, and these panels are giant. And so we had to think about, well, what is the average height of a 4th and 5th grader, and where do we need to put the text, and how big does it need to be so that they can read it and engage with it and not be like looking way up. And so there were lots of little things like that to help make the decision, but also larger kind of conceptual themes and rationale.
Can I add a little note? We had a lot of people review the text too.
Yes.
There were lots of Freedom Summer scholars from the university, in addition to Jackie and her colleagues, that reviewed the text for accuracy and for context. And another thing that kind of came up in this late spring were these images by Robert Shetterly from the Americans Who Tell the Truth. So we have images of Fannie Lou Hamer, a portrait from that, of John Lewis, and of Bob Moses. I think that's it, right? But those were really significant additions, and we hope to collaborate with that group later to share our curriculum as well.
Was a website devoted to this part of the initial planning, Alia? Was that always going to be a component?
Yes, and from the start, we always wanted it to be focused on educators and to be something a place because we knew that's not just the panels themselves, it's also the lesson plans and to integrate that curriculum and bring all these resources together. So yeah, a website was really important from the start. And also from my perspective too, there's a lot of design considerations, height, legibility that goes into viewing them in person. But some people, some students and children need some extra time or other ways to engage in work. They have visual impairments. So providing a digital site that allows students to zoom in on features where they might not be able to see those at the panel is also a really important accessibility component. And I think one of the wonderful ways that the digital world can kind of extend that reach of an exhibition. So, and we talked a little bit about design considerations. Something that really came about was there was a great debate about the captions. We have certain language that we need to use to give credit to the photographers or the institutions that have these images. But one of the things we were working through is that this still has to be understandable for 4th and 5th graders. And museums and often libraries use a certain kind of format, photographer first, right? Steve Shapiro comma, the title. But fourth and fifth graders don't understand that relationship to the artist and the work, unless like in that way they're not. So we had to kind of swap that around. Well, they wanted to understand what they're seeing and then show that relationship up to the artist later. So what we did is for the captions, put the title first that provides some context, and then explicitly said photograph by Steve Shapiro, photograph by Herbert Randall. And then they understand that relationship between art and artist a bit more. So that was an interesting kind of adjustment we made based on the audience.
And then Kim, you mentioned there are a lot of moving parts for the actual distribution of this exhibit. And so I'm daunted by, how much you had to plan for people reserving calendars and schedules, and then shipping arrangements, payment arrangements, and all of that. Is there something that you found most difficult about that whole process, or something you want to let us know was it seamless, or just elaborate maybe a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I expect that there will still be plenty more to learn once we actually ship out some of the panels, since we haven't done that yet. But I was very lucky to be able to consult with different partners across the university in various units to help put that all together. So I think it was interesting to make those connections and learn where the expertise is on campus. And that really helped make it not seamless, but a lot easier, I think, to go forward. So for example, for the payment website, I have no idea how we do payment processing on the university, or I didn't. And I was put in touch with the bursar's office to put that together. We were lucky enough to have in-house expertise for the calendaring site in the libraries. So worked with my colleague who does a lot of that for our equipment rentals and that kind of thing. And we apply that to the concept of reserving an exhibit as though it were a laptop in the library. And then I already mentioned that Jason Shaman here at MUAM was just invaluable with his previous experience with similar exhibits as well. And I should say, while I'm mentioning people who helped out, that I have a really wonderful student, Katie Elmer, who has been a great help over the last couple of months since the semester started with practicing getting things set up and getting organized, and really neatly labeling all of our panels in numerical order, and assisting with text, and just generally helping with those little details that make the logistics run smoothly.
Well, I think based on everyone's feedback there, this is truly not only interdisciplinary project, but also a cross-university activity that brought in many players, and something, as many things are, to be proud of, that Miami University has produced through its wonderful faculty and staff members. So, Sherry, do we have any questions from our Noontime Chatter audience?
Somebody was wondering, you mentioned all the collaboration, so maybe this question's already been answered, but they were wondering also, what is the cost of reserving this?
So the cost is currently set at $150 for 2 months, I believe, and then shipping will be on top of that, and we expect shipping to be around $100 per set. We have a little bit of a better idea of how that's typically running. We'll be sure to update the estimate on the website as well.
Those are all the questions that we have.
So before we go to, I think we should mention that this project was funded by the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation grant from they're an organization in Cleveland, Ohio that supports projects that go into Ohio public schools. That was really kind of the emphasis for us to really focus on 4th and 5th graders in the state of Ohio. But they were instrumental in making sure that we had the resources to produce the panels, produce the corresponding lesson plans, tying them to Ohio standards, and even securing the costs associated with all of these image rights. And so we thank them for that.
Yes, and thank you, all panel members, Jackie, Zach, Stephanie, Alia, and Kimmy. We'll see you next month for our next Noontime Chatter.
Thank you all for joining. I did want to take just a moment to let you know that we have another program coming up for the Art Museum next Wednesday from 5 to 7. It's in conjunction with our exhibition entitled Photo. And you can check out and learn more about that on our website at miamioh.edu/artmuseum. And we will be posting a video of this program on our YouTube channel within the coming week. Thank you all.